In my own life, I'm well past the anger phase and have accepted the many hard truths of human nature. But one of the few things that can bring back that rage is the abuse and subjugation of other men who have so much potential and are totally undervalued. For this video, I'm going to be tying two recent feminist transgressions into a more general theme of what the reality for the average man really is. I was inspired to make this when I found out that a hardcore radical feminist was chosen to speak at a convention for suicidal and depressed people, which, as I'll show later in the video, is mainly men. This woman doesn't even try to hide her hatred for men, and yet she was consciously chosen to speak to people in need of the smallest amount of encouragement. I'll let Philip DeFranco summarize the situation.
Then we had Clementine Ford in the news, a self-described unfuckwithable feminist demogorgon. And that's because reportedly Clementine is set to be a keynote speaker for a Lifeline event. Lifeline, if you don't know, is a suicide prevention group. The event is reportedly on domestic violence. And there are a lot of people trying to get her removed, kicked out of that position because of things that she has said online. Those tweets including, all men are scum and must die, kill all men, men are gross and also rapists, kill all men must die, the feminist doctrine decrees it. And the Change.org petition that has over 8,200 signatures goes on to say, as Lifeline is a service that is crucial to people experiencing high levels of emotional distress, many of them suicidal over bullying experiences, it is extremely important that they remain distant from the hateful comments previously made very loudly and consistently by Miss Ford. She must be removed from the speaking lineup for the protection of the very people you are funded to support. Now, what I would personally say is I would want to see the greater context of these replies. For example, one of them was a reply that read, "Congratulations, you found me out, all men must die." In that specific instance, it appears that she's mocking someone that's calling her a man-hater or something along those lines. But trying to figure out the context of some of the tweets, it was hard to tell because there were replies to tweets that no longer existed. But at the same time, when promoting her own book, she is also the same person that wrote, "I dipped a quill in the inky ocean of male tears and wrote an angry manifesto." So at the very least, I could understand how some people might assume that the context of the situation was very literal and matter-of-fact. Clementine has also now responded to this situation, saying she's addressed the intention behind these statements numerous times, saying if we lived in a world where women were murdering men en masse and men genuinely had reason to fear they might be murdered in their beds by a gang of marauding feminists, I would agree with your concern. As it is, we live in a world where it's women who are being murdered by men at a minimum rate of 1 a week in this country, not to mention the countless circumstances of sexual violence, physical harassment, and ongoing domestic violence perpetrated against women. And as of right now, the organizers of the event appear to be in her corner, saying Clementine's #1 mission is to speak openly and honestly about the state of the world as we live in it. Lifeline also reportedly saying it is commonplace for a range of views and perspectives to occur in a discussion panel. Lifeline does not necessarily agree with any particular panel member or commentator's views, but still there are many people saying that she shouldn't be on this because there are also other people who suffer from domestic violence or depression or suicide, and those people are also male. But all of that said, I do want to pass the question off to you.
I'm not going to focus on the double standard and how this situation would be totally different if the genders were reversed, because we live in societies where women are held to no standards. They are free to operate without restraints, and this shows their true nature. Instead, let's look at how ruthless an opponent a woman can make. When I first heard talk of a gender war, I scoffed at it because women are physically weak and would be annihilated in a real military engagement. Now, I see that men have lost their lives, their freedom, their wealth, their resources, and their morale from the policies instituted that enable women to abuse men. These are the basic tenets of warfare: to kill your enemy, cut off their supply lines, break their will, and reap the spoils of war.
My fear is that my sons will never understand me. How, Daniel? We won again! This is good. But what is best in life?
The open steppe, fleet horse, falcons at your wrist, and the wind in your hair.
Wrong! Conan, what is best in life?
To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women.
That is good. That is good.
I have come to accept that this is a proxy war. Women could not wage this battle on their own. Forces behind the scenes have utilized the destabilizing and destructive nature of women as a weapon against men. I can't tell you specifically who or what or to what end, because there is merit in most of the theories, but I can say that the gender relations will not be repaired in our lifetimes. The temptation for power will always be present when women learn of the history of their feminist predecessors and the spoils of war they reaped from the crusade against men. In a previous video regarding the Me Too movement, I said that women cannot know the art of war. This is true because they have made rookie mistakes that any seasoned combatant could avoid. Take, for instance, how armies from all nations across history have respected the concept of the prisoner of war. When a man is beaten, the victor shows honor by showing mercy. This in turn creates a mutual respect, even through the rivalries, that if the victor should become the loser in the future, he would also be spared. This is also why the victorious royalty would often spare and banish the defeated royalty, in the hopes that they would also be spared if the victors would one day face the sword. The modern man is defeated. He's directionless, displaced, and living in a dystopic hell of a culture with no values. Instead of showing mercy to the broken men, women have decided to push past the breaking point and to unleash unyielding cruelty upon all men who they deem are unworthy for reproduction. This is their fatal flaw, and only psychotic men of war have made this mistake in the past. It is a common tactic in warfare to allow your enemy an avenue of escape. If you were to completely encircle your enemy, you would force them to fight to the last man. If surrender is not an option, you have created an enemy that must fight and utilize all of its capabilities for a chance at survival, or to inflict as much damage to your forces as possible. A cornered dog is more vicious than a dog that can run away. The modern woman, in all her stupidity, has forced the modern man to fight or die in this gender war she has started. A modern man can fight in many ways beyond the physical, and I totally condemn any acts of violence. A modern man can fight the gynocentric system by unplugging from it and removing himself from harm's way. He can regroup online and save as many men as he can. He can practice the art of attrition and metaphorically burn the fields before winter by withdrawing his funds from the sexual marketplace, the driving force that keeps it operating. Dehumanizing an enemy leaves that enemy no choice but to retaliate in kind. The most ruthless and dysfunctional armies have dehumanized their opponents. What does that say about the feminists? If they can so easily treat men as disposable utilities and wish for their destruction, does that not show how the fragments of that belief were already in their psyche? If you entertain these radical feminist ideas, you can see how they have no depth or lasting merit. If modern women can be indoctrinated that easily, with a handful of signs for a protest, an advertisement featuring celebrities with a black and white filter, some fat women with dyed hair, and some catchy slogans that are turned into chants, obviously they have tapped into something that was there before, beneath the surface, and unleashed it upon the world. The next maneuver from feminists is the removal of the word boy in the Boy Scouts. There is no quarter for men in this gender war, and this applies to the youth as well. If you give your enemy an inch, they will take a mile. Men should have remained steadfast, and that's why laws and cultural codes existed, to prevent men with weak wills from fucking it up for the rest of us. With each generation since women's suffrage, more and more men have abandoned their posts as guardians and wardens of masculinity. It was their duty to pass on the fundamentals of masculinity to the next generation of men, and now today's youth is left to figure it out for themselves. No father figures, no grandfather figures, no wise man present to guide the wild and untamed youth. Now that the precious nature of masculinity is exposed, enemies both male and female have pounced on the opportunity to destroy men's future potential and to prevent boys from becoming men. Of course, the general population will do nothing. As long as the majority believes they are benefiting from a situation, they will not seek to change it. Some innocent men may be destroyed in the global witch hunt, but at least Beta Bob kept his head down and didn't rock the boat and disturb the women. The meaning of bread and circus has been taken to new levels as everyone numbs themselves to the realities that are knocking at their doors. How could one care about a group of broken men being subjected to a man-hating witch when there are selfies to take and celebrity gossip to catch up on? Then there are the men who take pleasure in the suffering of other men. These are the men who say things like, MGTOW are just removing themselves from the gene pool, more women for me. Just looking at some of the men defending this woman as a speaker for the suicide prevention organization disturbs me more than the fact that she was chosen in the first place. MGTOW on YouTube really is the last bastion of masculinity. Almost every book written in the last 60 years is tainted with gynocentric ideas. Modern television and movies are mostly garbage aimed at the lowest common denominator in society. Music has become the vocalization of the worship of women because women are the main consumers. A young man today with no guidance from masculine men either withers into oblivion like so many men do under the tremendous pressure they find themselves burdened with, or looks back to the wisdom of men from history and embraces hypermasculinity. The feminists, the women who passively support them and take the rights and privileges earned by the radicals and do nothing to stop them, and the puppet masters at work behind the scenes have encircled men. They have destroyed good men who could have changed the world if they were given a chance to turn their passions into productivity, and they have turned the rest of us into avatars for the ultimate expression of masculinity. You cannot defeat a MGTOW man. You may break his body, but his will is far removed from the claws of the harpies and their cuck slaves. He has freed himself of external validation, so society has no power over him. He is able to go where other men cannot, do what other men could only dream of, and become what our ancestors, the great men that came before us, wanted for the future. For those who have not come to terms with the danger and tragedies that have befallen the men around you, I've included some statistics that might help you understand the state of the game right now. As Doctor Strange said in the excellent new Avengers movie,
"There was no other way. We're in the endgame now."
Society cannot endure with these statistics, and the next phase will be brutal and unforgiving. All of these are from an excellent site called realsexism.com, and I encourage you to do your own research. Stay strong, because no one is coming to save you. You're a man, and you have to take care of yourself. That's why the MGTOW community on YouTube is essential for having an outlet to be with like-minded men.